America, 1900. Horses lined the main streets of every town and city in the country. Cars were still a curiosity. There were less than 150 miles of paved roads in America. Trucks and buses hadn't even been invented. But the world was changing fast, and most Americans looked forward to the future, to the 20th century. The mood was confident. So was the music, especially the marches of John Philip Sousa. In 1900, Sousa and his band were invited to the World's Fair in Paris, a grand exposition to celebrate the new century. Sousa's music was becoming known around the world as the music of America. The moving picture camera was new, and these short scenes taken in Paris that summer were among the first motion pictures ever made. People were fascinated just to see things move. The Eiffel Tower, built in 1889, was the symbol of Paris by 1900. To many, it also seemed a symbol of the future, with even greater wonders ahead in the 20th century. It was the tallest man-made structure in the world, and thousands rode the elevator to the top to see the world from a new perspective. In America, prosperity was the pledge. Campaigning for re-election, President William McKinley promised 4 more years of the full dinner pail. The Republicans chose New York Governor Theodore Roosevelt as McKinley's running mate, despite warnings that he might overshadow the president. The Democrats nominated William Jennings Bryan, who criticized Republican foreign policy and the acquisition of territories overseas, Hawaii, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Imperialism was the burning issue. But McKinley believed America had an obligation to civilize the new territories. In the Philippines, that meant war. Philippine guerrillas, led by Emilio Aguinaldo, were fighting for their independence, first from Spain, now in 1900 from America. The fighting was savage. Many Americans, including Mark Twain and Andrew Carnegie, joined the new Anti-Imperialist League in opposition to the war. The Philippine insurrection would last 3 years and cost more than the war with Spain. 4,000 Americans would die, more than 200,000 Filipinos. Aguinaldo was captured in 1901, and the Philippines were put on the road to independence. Although many Americans didn't support the Philippine insurrection, a vote for McKinley seemed a vote for continued prosperity, and he was re-elected by the largest margin in 30 years. Friendship and understanding between the Americas was the theme of the 1901 Pan American Exposition in Buffalo. At night, the dramatic and innovative use of electricity produced a dazzling city of lights, drawing power from a generator at nearby Niagara Falls. Visitors could tour the fairgrounds in boats through Venetian canals and visit exhibits of the latest developments in agriculture, forestry, and transportation. The fair's Spanish-style architecture influenced building styles for the rest of the decade. September 5th, 1901, was President's Day at the fair in Buffalo, and 50,000 were on hand to welcome President McKinley and his wife. Moving picture cameramen were also there to record the president's military review. Despite the recent war with Spain and in the Philippines, McKinley was not a warrior, but he was a strong advocate of foreign trade and expansion of the merchant marine. The period of exclusiveness is past, he said. Isolation is no longer possible or desirable. A public reception for the president at the Temple of Music the following day drew a huge crowd. But something was wrong. Word spread quickly. The president had been shot. The assassin was an anarchist named Leon Chalgos. Doctors were unable to remove the bullet, but were optimistic that the president would recover. A week later, McKinley died. After lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, McKinley's body was taken home by train to Canton, Ohio, for burial. The new president, Theodore Roosevelt, called it a terrible blow and reassured many, saying he would continue unbroken McKinley's policies of peace and prosperity with honor. Within 8 weeks, assassin Leon Chalgos would be tried, convicted, and electrocuted. At 42, Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest president in American history. As New York City Police Commissioner and Governor of New York State, Roosevelt had earned a reputation as an enemy of corruption. Roosevelt was also a vigorous outdoorsman, an advocate of the strenuous life. During the Spanish-American War, he helped organize the Rough Riders and became known across the nation as the hero of the Battle of San Juan Hill. Roosevelt was more popular with the people than with the politicians. The New York political bosses had pushed for his nomination as vice president, hoping to get him out of the state and into a dead-end job. Now, as New York Senator Mark Hanna put it, that damn cowboy is president. The bosses had good reason to worry. In 1902, the Roosevelt administration brought suit against the Railroad Trust, and there were later attacks on the beef, oil, and tobacco trusts. Government regulation in the public interest was Roosevelt's intention. There were new signs of frustration. Socialists were gaining strength in working-class communities, and their demands were radical. Socialism is coming, they warned. You can smell it in the air. You can taste it in the price of beef. In the spring of 1902, 50,000 anthracite coal miners walked out on strike, demanding better pay, shorter hours, and union recognition. When mine owners refused to negotiate with John Mitchell, president of the United Mine Workers, Roosevelt threatened to send in troops to operate the mines. The owners then agreed to arbitration by a presidential commission. Roosevelt later said he was just trying to give labor and capital a square deal, but his action was without precedent. Never before had a president used the threat of federal troops to settle a dispute between labor and capital. As president, Roosevelt tried to represent those who could not speak for themselves. At last, many Americans believed there was someone in the White House who could deal effectively with the captains of industry, for the people, and for the public interest. Theodore Roosevelt's domestic policies made him enormously popular. During his years in the White House, he vastly increased the power of the president. His handling of foreign affairs was determined and direct. Speak softly, he advised, but carry a big stick. Teddy's biggest stick was the U.S. Navy. In 1907, he sent American battleships and destroyers, the Great White Fleet, around the world as a show of strength. Roosevelt was the Navy's strongest supporter. I wish to see the United States the dominant power on the shores of the Pacific Ocean, he said. During his years in the White House, the American Navy doubled in size, and young men were inspired to join the Navy and see the world. In 1906, Rough Riders and motion picture cameramen accompanied the president to Panama to inspect early progress on construction of the Panama Canal. The ethics of America's acquisition of the canal zone were questionable, but Roosevelt was not deterred by criticism. I took the canal zone and let the Congress debate.